Mm, okay.
Social forces on an individual's public and private lives. So this was created by C. Wright Mills, who defines the sociological imagination as it enables us to grasp history and the biography and the relationship between the two within society. That's its task and its promise. So it considers differences between class, power, status, things that separate groups of people. And neither the life of an individual nor the history of a society can be understood without understanding both. Think about that. The life of the individual and the history of the society. Draw the connections between the two. What are its overlap? And then we could grasp a better understanding of things around it as well as itself. It focuses on systems rather than individual issues. Rather than focusing on a personal thing going on someone's private life, it takes a look at the systems and analyzes what causes people to to make that decision, or what causes the masses to make decisions. So, the sociological imagination is a book by C. Wright Mills where he details this concept, and he really just develops this idea and the relationship between the self, society, and this is how it's understood. And it was published in 1959. So it's very interesting. You could get the book on Amazon right here. So yeah, you could check that out. But yeah, moving on to troubles versus issues. So you gotta know the difference between the trouble versus an issue, a personal trouble versus a public social issue. A personal trouble goes on in someone's life. It affects them, and a public social issue affects many people in the community, the masses, the county, the country, and you got to see how these issues affect individuals residing within the system. How do the personal troubles, the public social issues, how does it affect people? So now there's some things that you got to consider. There's a lot of terms. So just that to build your understanding, I will read this really quickly. The sociological perspective is the perspective of sociology involves seeing through the outside appearance of people's actions and organizations. So why do people see from the outside looking at someone's actions or organization? What's the influence? What caused someone to think that certain way, to do that certain thing? A social group or an institution is an organization or group that has a specific roles, norms, expectations, and has functions that it meets in society. So think about social institutions that maybe you attend, you are part of, or ones that affect your community. You could take a look at schools, for example, education. How does it affect the group or the organization? How does it affect the children attending the school? What are its roles? It's supposed to educate. Social structure are those regular and repetitive aspects of interactions between the members of a given social entity. So what patterns do you see in social structures? For example, you could take a look at power. Who has the most power in these social structures and institutions? So the sociological imagination, let's talk a little bit about the imagination. Use your imagination, because by using your imagination and thinking, you can make connections between historical, critical, structural, cultural, all how these are intertwined, interdependent, or how they stand alone, and how this affects your life individually. How does the history of where you live, for example, affect your view, affect what you do? How does your culture affect your life? How do social structures, how do things like schools, as I mentioned previously, how does that affect you? So there's more of this kind of thinking that we could apply. So that's an introduction really to the concept, to understanding how it affects and about the sociological imagination. So we'll move on to its uses. now that you have a better understanding, because it really is something that's for everyone. You could use it in your personal life, for personal decisions. You could use it to find, if you're thinking about a social issue, if you want to find a solution to a social issue, then apply it on that larger scale to find the solution. So let's just take a look at its influence. So you can see how your actions are influenced by morals, previous choices, and others around us. So, or how as an individuals, for example, how are their actions influenced by their morals? How are their actions influenced by previous choices? If they've done something before, will they do it again? How did it work in the past? And do they want to continue that? Also, others around them. So are they being pressured to make a decision by others? Do they want to make the decision, or is it going to make someone proud? Is it going to satisfy someone's expectations? These all influence actions and choices. So how can you use the sociological imagination? So this is a list I found. So it's about avoiding existing procedures. So what are things in society that exist already? And just don't look at that. Don't look at things that are already set. And be clear and concise. Be unbiased and think exactly problem solution. Observe macro and micro. How does a certain system change, for example, affect the large scale versus an individual? You could do this with law and policy. How does one law affect the state versus the county versus a person versus a business owner? Observing social structures is observing what's already set in place. How does this form? How does this shape? How does this impact society? And lastly, avoid arbitrary specialization and consider human history. So this just goes into looking at the past and how it's affected, how it's leaded us to get to where we are today. So why? Why the sociological imagination? It'll guide you. Using the sociological imagination can personally help you when making decisions. It could also help you when you deal with adversity and problems. You can use the sociological imagination to see how others are affected by the same problems, why one is thinking a certain way, why one is doing a certain thing. And you can connect it to the environment around you. So you can connect it to others. You can connect it to institutions. So we're going to give it a try. The first example we're going to practice is just a simple, let's go on a hike. What are the benefits of going on a hike? Think about that for a second. How does it benefit your health? How does it benefit your community? And what are its social benefits? So beginning with health benefits, it lowers the risk of heart disease and it relieves stress because it's exercise. It's a healthy form of exercise. It clears your mind. It's good for you. Community. How does this affect your community? What good is going on a hike for your community? It inspires others to get outside. So by others seeing you go out and enjoy yourself, they might be inspired to do the same. It draws attention to building nice trails. So on more political level, lawmakers, if you are out there using the hiking trails, lawmakers will see, oh, people are using this, therefore we should put more attention into this. And it celebrates the environment. You're going out there and enjoying natural resources. And what are the social benefits? So socially, you can, make friends, form a hiking group, interact with others. You're going outside and you're putting yourself out there. Therefore, you'll see other people doing the same, and you could find out what you have in common with them. That's exciting, I think. So now we're going to apply this to a problem, to an issue. So how can we solve problems? So the example I'm going to use is smoking. So I want you to think, is this trouble, a personal trouble, or a public issue? Is smoking cigarette addiction, is it something we see that's happening on many people worldwide have this addiction? So is it a public issue? But it's a personal problem that people face. So is it a personal trouble? That's what you have to ask yourself when going over this adversity in society. So, what do you view cigarette addiction as? Is it something personal? Is it public? So, when I was considering this myself, I considered celebrations, work break, or social events, events where people will smoke. So, is someone consciously choosing to smoke when they smoke, or is it because they're addicted and they just feel the need to have a cigarette and they feel the need, their brain relies on it? Is that why they're smoking? And if they're from a family of smokers and they've always had that influence throughout their life, so they're gonna go and they're gonna do the same. And how is this gonna affect them? Is it really their fault? But they're addicted to the nicotine. So if they wanna stop, it's not easy to just quit. And they're influenced by others around them. There's social acceptance. There's a level of pressure to adapt this behavior. So, how is this really affecting all of the people that smoke? Is it something that I mean, we all know it's something that many people deal with, but is it something that we should address on a public issue? Or is it something that's a personal trouble and that's in someone's personal life? What are we supposed to do? What are some solutions? So now we could go back and we could use some steps of the sociological imagination, such as these steps to think about it. Alrighty, thank you so much for listening. Here are my works cited, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Good stuff, Olivia. Thank you so much. Sorry for that confusion in the beginning. And
Thank you. Oh no worries. I was looking at the wrong one. I'm sorry about that.
yeah, so I did like figure it out while you were in your presentation, but she put a different link of the program in the Zoom than the one she sent out in the email. So the one you were referring to was in the email, and that was like,
yeah, no, that's what I noticed. Sorry about that.
no, you're so good. It says I have one. Oh, okay, no, that's just okay. So, just to start off with like some few little questions, like why were you so interested in this research topic?
So I was interested in it because it's one of the first topics we went over in our sociology class, and I just like the idea of taking a look at society from a philosophical standpoint and just solving problems using your imagination. You know, it sounds kind of funny.
For sure. And like, what, like, are you soc major? Like, I'm totally forgetting what major you were. Like,
I'm communications. I was doing the sociology honors class for my general ed.
Oh, okay. And like, do you think this like helped you go further in like your communications major, or like were you just like, oh, I'm gonna do it just for fun?
No, it definitely was beneficial because the topic of sociology, it's society, and communications has a portion of it that involves media, and it's outreaching to society. The audience is society. So because of that's the audience, and also it's like studying what my audience is and studying human behavior, studying um, aspects of interaction and how different things affect people. And when you take a look at that and then apply it to communications, it's you sort of see the effect that one person has on another, or one person has on many people, one person has on a community, a country, whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like, do you ever plan to do like more research on this topic, or are you just wanting to like kind of touch the surface?
Um, I think I could see myself doing more research. I feel like I definitely learned a lot from researching for the Omni.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the thing is, the concept, I guess you could say it's very abstract, kind of looking at use your imagination. How does this, you really could take this concept and do whatever you want with it in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel like just kind of
doing that, I could see myself doing more of.
Perfect. And I mean, that's all the questions that I have for now. Does anyone else have any questions for Olivia? Perfect. And if not, I'll go ahead and move on to the next presenter, which would be, I believe, hold on, let me find it. I believe it would be Grace Lee, which is also a pre-recorded presentation. So we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you so much, Olivia.
Thank you.
So,
Among the many things that the COVID-19 pandemic has fueled, conscious consumerism is one of the biggest, and a large number of companies have responded by announcing net zero or carbon neutral commitments, pledging to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and investing in climate action. With growing alertness and demand for climate action amongst consumers, adopting environmental, social, and governance (ESG) measures is now more important than ever for businesses of all sizes to thrive in the present and also the future. This research will be covering the following topics: what is ESG management, background of the emergence of ESG, importance of ESG, recent studies emphasizing the rise of ESG and statistics, and challenges of ESG. In the past, a company's value was evaluated based on its core technology, market share, and financial stability. However, climate change and the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic have further increased the importance of the non-financial value of companies as represented by ESG. ESG is an acronym for Environmental, Social, and Governance Management. Together, these describe whether a company fulfills its responsibility towards the environment through eco-friendly management, whether it fulfills its social responsibilities by contributing to customers, shareholders, and employees, and whether the governance structure is transparent, such as in succession planning. For example, no matter how excellent a company's product or technology is, if unethical behavior, environmental pollution, abuse of authority, industrial accidents, or consumer damage occur in the production or development process, customers will eventually move away from the company and its products. Therefore, ESG management is a key factor for a company to achieve sustainable development from a long-term perspective, and it can be further described as a non-financial indicator that has a significant impact on corporate value. Sustainable development first came to the fore in 1987 in a report called Our Common Future, which was jointly adopted by the United Nations Environment Programme and the World Commission on Environment and Development. Also known as the Brundtland Report, it defines sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Afterwards, UNEP adopted the Rio Declaration at the 1992 Rio Conference, establishing the world's three major environmental conventions: the Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Convention to Combat Desertification. In 2006, the UNPRI, Principles for Responsible Investment, the cornerstone of current ESG management, was born. The UNPRI is built on the principle of considering issues related to environment, society, and governance in the establishment of investment policies, corporate decision-making, and asset management. In 2019, the Business Roundtable, an annual meeting attended by the most influential CEOs in the US, such as those of Apple, Amazon, and Walmart, abolished the principle of maximizing shareholder profits, which until that point had been the most important purpose of companies, and presented a new corporate purpose that integrates the values of all of a company's stakeholders. BlackRock, a global asset management company, is a major shareholder in many well-known companies around the world. In 2021, BlackRock's CEO announced to all companies it invests in that they needed to make their business model align with net zero, which is carbon neutrality, reducing greenhouse gases as much as possible to reduce actual emissions to zero by 2050 and disclose a business plan to achieve it. This suggests that even BlackRock, the world's most influential asset management company, considers ESG management to be crucial. And outside of business itself, there are many strategies that correspond to ESG among the key policies of the current Biden administration. One of them is that the United States has officially declared a goal of net zero by 2050, and the $1 trillion infrastructure bill has been passed by the Senate. Moody's and S&P, world-renowned rating agencies, now evaluate a company's credit by considering ESG in addition to its existing financial value. All in all, new ESG-driven regulations are expected to be strengthened and newly created in the future, and companies that refuse to adapt are likely to be alienated from investors and consumers. Numerous studies highlight the benefits and rising implementation of ESG management across global corporations. One such study conducted by the Journal of Corporate Finance confirms the inverse relationship between ESG government ratings and IPO underpricing, such that as ESG rating increases, underpricing decreases. The first table shows the multivariate analysis conducted to show this relation. This type of analysis is one of the most useful methods to determine relationships and analyze patterns among large sets of data. A value of negative 0.0661 on the first row and first column indicates that for every 1 unit improvement in a country's ESG government rating, there is a negative 0.0661 unit decrease in underpricing, meaning a 7.07% decrease. The second table on the right considers whether shareholder protection influences the association between ESG and underpricing. Even when controlling the shareholder rights in the model, data continues to show sufficient evidence of the negative association between ESG and underpricing. Thus, the analysis confirms the hypothesis that ESG government ratings are negatively correlated with firm-level IPO underpricing. Another study from the National Library of Medicine in 2022 shows how dynamic capabilities, DCs, significantly affect sustainable management performance through the implementation of ESG strategy as a mediating variable. Dynamic capabilities concept centers on the firm's ability to remain competitive given a high rate of change in the environment. The study focuses on two main capabilities, which are absorptive and adaptive capability, recognizing external information and adjusting accordingly. The dependent variable was the firm's sustainable management performance, SMP, referring to economic, environmental, and social performance, and the independent variable was the dynamic capabilities. The mediation variable in this study, as mentioned, was the ESG strategy. In statistics, a mediating variable is one which explains the how or why of a relationship between two variables. The results showed that the absorptive capability had a value of 2.885 and adaptive capability had a value of 4.832. These values are positive and significant, meaning that there is sufficient evidence in dynamic capabilities having a positive effect on ESG strategy. In addition, the path from the ESG strategy to SMP was also positive and significant, with a value of 3.022. More importantly, when the mediating variable ESG strategy was included in the model, the R-squared of SMP further increased from 0.372 to 0.436. This demonstrates that ESG strategy implementation plays an important role in mediating between DCs and SMP. The study therefore provides evidence that firms should implement ESG strategies in order to achieve the sustainable value required by modern society. Another study focuses on how the relation of real earnings management and financial leverage is more positive in firms with less sustainable practices. Firms engaging in higher sustainable practices have more debt financing and have no incentives to engage in costly REM practices to benefit from additional resources. Meanwhile, firms that engage less in ESG performance often try to attract public attention to their performance and therefore have become more vigilant about managerial practices. Thus, with the adverse selection problem and the risk of being scrutinized, managers caring less about ESG practices are more likely to indulge in hidden manipulative practices through REM to get access to debt capital. To further study this topic, the research focused on 5 ASEAN countries to prove how the positive association between REM and financial leverage is more pronounced in firms with less sustainable practices. As presented in the table, according to the first column, real EM, higher leverage is associated with higher REM in low ESG performing firms, firms with low environmental performance, low social performance, and low governance performance. The result confirms the hypothesis and suggests that firms engaging less in ESG practices are more likely to indulge in hidden manipulative practices through REM to get access to debt capital. As much as ESG is a recent concept, there is still an ongoing discussion on whether ESG is a priced risk factor. For instance, if inflation is a factor, investors may prefer securities that offer higher returns when inflation increases, but would be willing to accept lower returns on such securities when inflation falls. Like the hypothetical inflation factor, to the extent that investors prefer highly rated ESG companies for social reasons, the result will be higher prices and lower expected returns. However, from the point of view of the company and society, there will be benefits. The lower expected returns imply a lower discount rate and, thereby, greater investment in green projects and higher market values for green companies. Due to the complications in low expected returns for individuals but contribution to society, the jury is still out on whether there is an ESG risk factor. To conclude, investors' preferences for companies with high ESG ratings can lead to lower cost of equity capital that encourage investment in green technologies. Although there is a rising demand for roles in ESG, there are downsides to be aware of as well. The most controversial issue in the ESG bond market is the possibility of greenwashing for issued bonds. Greenwashing refers to raising funds through bond issuance while presenting goals or achievements that are far from eco-friendly management in reality. There are already cases of issued ESG bonds that have been criticized for not meeting ESG purposes abroad. The French high-end luxury fashion house Chanel has recently been criticized for greenwashing after it was revealed that it failed to meet its 2021 renewable energy goal, which it proposed while issuing ESG bonds. The ESG bonds of Tesco, the UK's largest supermarket chain, have also come under fire for presenting a target of reducing the company's annual carbon emissions by only 2%. As the level of scrutiny and criticism surrounding greenwashing increases, bond issuers are beginning to weigh the pros and cons of issuing ESG bonds more closely. In this situation, some companies are holding back from issuing ESG bonds, citing the rapidly changing regulatory environment and reputational risk. The lack of transparency of means for investors to determine the legitimacy of their investments is also becoming an issue in the bond market. According to the results of the second 2021 survey recently released by the International Climate Bond Initiative, only 57% of green bond issuers disclosed both the details of use of funds and their environmental impact. 77% of the cases disclosed the details of the use of funds, but only 59% of the cases disclosed the environmental impact. With these potential downsides, yet with its expanding, redefining impact on business, including IPO underpricing, sustainable management performance, leverage, and real earnings management, ESG has emerged as a significant topic in the financial market and industry, especially in the era of COVID-19. In 2021, the trend of ESG throughout the economy, such as in management, consumption, and investment, has now become a daily routine. In the past, profit maximization was regarded as the highest virtue of a company, but now interest in corporate social responsibility and sustainable management is growing. If companies neglect ESG management, they may face various risks ranging from effects to the business itself, its credit ratings, or a regulatory response, and as a result, they may lose trust from key stakeholders such as investors, customers, and society. Therefore, preparing and implementing ESG management will become an essential survival strategy over time, not an option. Thank you.
Perfect. And that was great, sweet. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know that like companies are working towards being more sustainable, but that could be super hard to keep them accountable. I guess I'll give everyone the same question. Like, what made you want to research this topic in particular?
So as a business major, I was always interested in this topic. And also, I've been seeing a lot of business news related to ESG management. And I really like felt the change of companies prioritizing profits to more of like environment and society. So I thought it would be interesting to dive really in depth about this topic. And also it was a really recent topic. So there were a lot of recent studies to focus on. So I thought it was a great idea to focus on it.
Yeah, that was like that. Now that you mentioned that, I did realize like most of your sources were like either 2021
Mhm.
or 2022. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
usually when you do research, it's like 5 years ago, but this is all super recent. Do you maybe have any ideas to help with the ESG bonds? I thought that was very fascinating that they give money, but then they don't really perform. Like, do you think there should be some kind of repercussion for not meeting this standard, or should they continue? Kind of, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think people issuing those ESG bonds should be more kind of, I would say, picky on it, whether on the choices of which companies they would be providing ESG bonds to. So I think companies should be more transparent about it. So requiring transparency in different companies would be a helpful option.
For sure. And is there any like company that's doing good in terms of ASG? I know you highlight maybe a lot of like the bad parts of it because that's what's really important, but has there been any benefits from all of this?
So a company that comes right on top of my head is probably Apple, because recently Apple has gave their announcement about their focus in ESG developments. And also they've announced that for their suppliers, they would only be getting supplies from those companies that prioritize ESG management. And also there are options of trade-offs. They're already actually implementing different ESG management options. So I think definitely Apple is one of the top companies.
Oh, it's super fun how this is all going to roll out and like, because it's such a new concept just to see how it's
Yeah.
all going to play out like later in the years when like we're already like graduated or whatever. I'm
Mhm.
interested to see what changes come because even now you see a bunch of like clothing brands in particular just because they do a lot of like waste. They do produce a lot of waste. They're like, oh, this is all recycled materials, but it's like how accurate is that actually? So this is a
Yeah,
very interesting presentation for me. So thank you.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Is there anybody else or any questions for Grace? And then I'll wrap it up with one last question. What do you think is the most important takeaway from your presentation?
So I think the most important takeaway is our focus that's shifting. So before companies and also people were really focused on the profit of a company, but now it's really changing towards environment and society. So I think people, the customers as well, should be acknowledging the changes in different parts of companies, and also companies also should be acknowledging these changes and being adaptive to these to drive more in the future.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to, sorry, let me take a look at the program. Quinn, on how to find the beauty of life after the trauma of war. Wow, this one should be interesting. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
All right. Hello, everybody. Here is my presentation on how to find the beauty of life after the trauma of war. So, who am I? Hello, everybody. My name is Quinn Sprague, and I'm currently a freshman at Maricosta College. And I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree in registered nursing, which deals with behavior of trauma. I'm enrolled as an honor student in my English 100 class, which has given me the opportunity to present this lecture for you guys today. All right, in this presentation, I will be mostly explaining what generational trauma means and how it pertains to the literary fiction novel titled On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, written by Ocean Vuong. I will first begin by stating a few facts about the Vietnam War and the lifestyles by Vietnamese citizens. And then I will present a brief overview of the definition of generational trauma and what it means to live with it in a foreign country. I will then give a brief overview of the author and poet Ocean Vuong and a summary of his novel. After introducing you guys to the main characters of the novel, I will delve into the actual substance of the point of my presentation, which is how generational trauma is shown through little dog Vaughn and Rose, which are the main characters throughout the novel, and how they learn to discover life's beauty despite said trauma. Okay, so the Vietnam War. Began in the mid-50s and continued on through its slow political battles and guerrilla warfare, severely slowing down the time it took for anything to really be accomplished. Many members of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or South Vietnamese Army, fought alongside the U.S. Army. However, oftentimes they carried a lack of discipline and refused to fight, especially in cases such as the 1968 Tet Offensive, which is mentioned as a deception case of trauma in Lon, the grandmother of the novel. Okay. Some civilians served the U.S. Army as interpreters, contractors, or cleaning workers. Others traded sides from day to day, using the U.S. Army and the Viet Cong based on the meeting of their most basic needs, but all experienced the violent, bloody, and dreadful nature of war. After the fall of Saigon, signaling the end of the war in 1975, nearly 130,000 Vietnamese citizens fled the country. Images of Vietnamese citizens attempting to board U.S. ships and aircrafts flooded television screens across America, leading to a growth of prejudice against these people. A Gallup poll revealed that only 36% of citizens were in favor of immigration. And as of 2015, 1.3 million Vietnamese immigrants lived in the U.S., with over 95% of them because of the aftermath of the war, and for just an overall better life. Now, on to the main problem that I will be discussing today, which is generational trauma. So, what is generational trauma, and how does it manifest in families and communities? Generational trauma is most basically defined as trauma that isn't just experienced by one person, but extends from one generation to the next, with ever decreasing values. In the field of study known as epigenetics, a study was published defining epigenetics as a set of potentially heritable changes in the genome that can be introduced by environmental events. Symptoms of generational trauma consist of hyperventilation, a sense of shortened future, mistrust, high anxiety, depression, panic attacks, nightmares, insomnia, sporadic fight or flight responses, and issues with self-esteem and confidence. What makes this even better is that there's no direct clinical treatment besides time for this type of disease. In 1966, generational trauma was first recognized by a Canadian psychiatrist by the name of Vivian M. Rokoff, who recorded high rates of psychological distress among children of individuals who survived the Holocaust. A quote from another, more modern psychiatrist by the name of Dr. De Silva states that people in countries that have endured years, even decades of war, also have generational trauma. I wonder what wars went on for decades. Maybe, for example, the Vietnam War. All right. So The main thing that carried back to the US from the war from Vietnamese citizens was not entirely a loss of money or materials, but a loss of wealth and stability to one's mental being after the terrible deeds that war had seared into their minds. In fact, a study on intergenerational stress on refugees found that second generation Vietnamese Americans were extremely sensitive to their parents' trauma and often felt a burden to compensate for their parents' losses. In the case of the Southeast Asian community, refugees who undergo PTSD experience constant hyperactive stress responses that produce abnormally high cortisol levels, which is symptomatic of long-term stress. These abnormal hormone levels can be passed on to offspring during fetal development, who have a greater risk of hyperactive stress response that contributes to anxiety or depression. One of these many children of Vietnamese immigrants is a little poet by the name of Ocean Vuong. So, who is Ocean? Ocean Vuong is a poet born in Ho Chi Minh City, which is formerly known as Saigon. He was born on October 14th, 1988. He immigrated to the U.S. When he was only 2 with his mother and grandmother. Vuong had a complicated relationship with his mother, which is most likely the result of PTSD from living in the wake of the war and moving to an entirely foreign country, as well as not being able to read. He is the author of the semi-autobiographical best-selling novel that we will now delve into, titled On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. So, this novel, one second here. This novel is a letter from a son to his mother, knowing that she won't even be able to read it. On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous deals with heavy themes of the subject matters of traumatic effects of war, abusive relationships, race, masculinity, beauty, drugs, sex, coming out, etc. Though saddening at times, Vuong's unique prose style and use of language made On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous a worthwhile read. Little Dog is the main character of the novel, who mirrors the life of Ocean Vuong. He is a young boy who grows up with Rose and his grandmother, Lon, in a tiny Hartford apartment. Rose is perpetually plagued by flashbacks to the traumas she saw and suffered during the war. Her episodes incite perpetual outbursts of rage and violence against her young son. Lon reminds her grandson that his mother cannot help her behavior as she is mentally unwell. Though Little Dog seems to possess a deeper connection with Lon, Lon also suffers from schizophrenia and is never entirely stable either. Though the eventual passing of his grandmother and another attempt to through the eventual passing of his grandmother, and another attempt to writing his mother, Little Dog eventually achieves peace with his loss. Through writing, ascending his memories, the raw truth of his hurt and grief, Little Dog is able to reconcile each of his relationships to better understand himself and imagine his future. Okay. Oftentimes, Ocean would sporadically infer different life happenings of Little Dog, almost like the sporadic nature of the fight or flight response in trauma patients. Little Dog recounts his mother's experiences during the war, as well as those of his grandmother Lon throughout the novel, which result in a stark picture of violence, suffering, and starvation. Rose watched her school collapse after an American napalm raid, and much of her childhood was punctuated by gunshots, frequent bombings, and mortar fire. Little Dog confronts the lasting effects of trauma, including the post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) Rose lives with after the war. The violence of Rose's childhood in Vietnam mirrored the violence of Little Dog's childhood in Hartford. Here's a quote from Little Dog. I read that parents suffering from PTSD are more likely to hit their children. With the portrayal of war and trauma, or sorry, end quote. With the portrayal of war and trauma in On Earth We Briefly Gorgeous, Vaughn underscores the multi-generational effects of war and ultimately argues that there is a direct relationship between war, trauma, and abuse. When Little Dog is a younger boy, just about 5, he hides behind a door to prank his mother. And as Rose walks by, he jumps out and yells, "Boom!" Rose screams, her face raked and twisted, and breaks down in tears, grabbing her chest and grasping for air. Little Dog means only to scare her as a joke, and he doesn't understand Rose's catastrophic reaction. Rose lived her entire life in the state of constant fear and anticipation of violence, and this state remains even after the war. One 4th of July, when Little Dog's neighbors set off fireworks in a celebration, Rose throws herself on top of Little Dog and covers his mouth. Quote, "Shh, if you scream," she says to Little Dog, "the mortars will know that we are here." It has, or end quote. It has been several years since the war, but the booming sounds of fireworks and Rose's lasting trauma launch her right back into Vietnam of the 70s. After dinner one night, the sound of gunshots ring out, and Rose drops to the floor screaming. "Someone turn off the lights," she yells. According to Little Dog, gunshots are not uncommon in Connecticut and can be often heard from their apartment. Rose's disproportionate reaction to the gunshots is further evidence of her lasting trauma. Here is one of the best quotes that can sum up this all. Quote, "As a girl, you watched from a banana grove your schoolhouse collapse after an American napalm raid. At 5, you never stepped into a classroom again. Our mother, our mother tongue, then, is no mother at all, but an orphan. Our Vietnamese, a time capsule, a mark of where your education ended, ashed. Ma, to speak in your mother tongue is to speak only partially in Vietnamese, but entirely in war." All right. So, out of all the themes of the novel, the nature of beauty seems to be of notable concern. Little Dog is obsessed in how one finds beauty in things, and why we are all attracted to them. Little Dog recalls a memory of his grandmother, Lon, encouraging him to pull out and keep a few violet flowers across a chain link fence that divided the interstate from the sidewalk. Though Little Dog felt sick to do so, he managed to take the flowers and rejoiced in Lon's delight with the flowers. Little Dog then expressed, quote, "It was beauty I learned that we risked ourselves for," end quote. In this way, we can come to learn that an object that is to give joy is also at the expense of risk and danger. Later, following Lon's passing, Little Dog remarks, "I'm thinking of beauty again." Sorry, quote, "I am thinking of beauty again, how some things are hunted because we have deemed them beautiful. If relative to the history of our planet, an individual life is so short, a blink of an eye, as they say, then to be gorgeous, even from the day you are born to the day that you die, is to be gorgeous only briefly. Like right now, how the sun is coming out behind the elms, and I can't tell the difference between a sunset and a sunrise." End quote. For this, or from this, we can decipher that everything in life is not just black and white, but is a balance. Much like how trauma will never entirely outdo the desire for beauty in one's mind and body, even if it sometimes might seem that way. Even if you have a hard life, you are not reduced to the trauma and hardships from your past, and that happiness and sadness exist right alongside of each other. All right, to sum everything up that I've stated today, I beg you to leave with this last thought in your mind. Trauma is not defining, but is a valued contrast to beauty. As bad as the Vietnam War was to the U.S. soldiers who fought in this pointless war, um, forced to being forced to live among it, like the characters of On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, is much more undesirable. However, beauty can still be found throughout everyone, no matter how rough their personal pasts have been.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And let me just pull up the. So Quinn, is just that was so I've never seen a presentation on trauma before for the Omni, so that was super interesting to listen to, especially for books. What chose you to do books instead of like maybe a movie?
Yeah, sure. So I already had to read this book anyways for my honors section of my English class. And we were given like an ultimatum whether to do an essay on this novel or do a presentation for the class. So I just thought, what the heck, why don't I just do the Omni presentation as well as presenting to the class. But when we were reading the novel, we were originally looking for cultural wealths, but trauma just kept being brought up, and that was just the thing that was most seared in my mind when I was reading this. So yeah, that's why I wrote about that.
And I don't know what you're like when you're reading, but when I read, I tend to get really into the characters or even in movies. So like, was it difficult to kind of like picture the situation that they were in, or could you find yourself easily relating maybe because of like family and things like that? What was like something that was challenging trying to figure out about the characters?
I mean, I definitely don't fully understand the Vietnamese just like trauma and lifestyles that are depicted in or are just happening in everyday life. But it was easy to figure this out through the novel. Vong is definitely like a good example of someone who's just puts everything out there that you can easily understand. But yeah, I mean, my family life is certainly not as let's say, I mean, abusive as Ocean's was. I know that many Vietnamese parents are tiger parents, and they just pride themselves in physical and emotional abuse of their children in order for them to succeed. Um, yeah.
And then just one more question from me. What was your favorite source that you worked with?
Um, let's see. Favorite source.
Yeah, and why, if you could, even if it's like the book or maybe like going into the history. I like how you like kind of preface the books with like the history of the Vietnam War, and that was super helpful.
Yeah. I actually was really interested in looking over the psychology into the Vietnamese immigrants and just how their minds are just fully shaped differently coming from Vietnam after the war and only experiencing that war just like how some kids did, like Ocean or Ocean's mother. Is that was just very interesting.
For sure. Yeah, that's all from me. Does anyone else have any other questions for Quinn? If not, we could go ahead and go into like a 10-minute break if that's okay with everyone. Yeah, we'll go ahead and come back at or we could do like 25. We'll come back at 10:25. That's like a 12-minute break. So at 10:25, if everyone can come back, the next presenter at that time will be Bailey Arnold. So Bailey, make sure you're here at like 10:25. And Olivia, you can go ahead and move into breakout room 4 because you'll be presenting there at the second half of the break. So I see you all at 10:25.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and start to screen share. Oh, Bailey, you're live, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. So let me give you access to screen share. Or can you screen share? Can you try screen sharing? You have the option.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Let me see. All right.
Perfect. And I'll go ahead and keep time. So I think you have 15 minutes, I believe.
All righty. All right. Ready? Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Bailey Arnold, and I did my research project on the exploration of the future of cancer treatment under the guidance of my professor, Jesus Zapata Pachon, for my Physics 152 class. So if one were to be diagnosed with cancer, some of the most common methods of cancer treatment include surgical removal of the tumor or site of the cancer, radiation with X-rays, or chemotherapy, which inhibits the DNA growth, so it does not allow the tumor or cancer to grow anymore, thus shrinking the tumor or stopping it from growing completely. And while these are very great methods of cancer treatment that have allowed individuals to have a great prognosis and better quality of life, these methods are not without risk. So there are many possible side effects of chemotherapy, as you can see from the image on the left. One of the most common side effects is hair loss that we see very commonly in patients with cancer. Also, cognitive decline, anxiety and depression, a weakened heart and immune system. And on the right, you can see that the image is demonstrating a child who has received radiation therapy when they were younger, and the risk of developing a secondary cancer close in proximity to where the radiation was administered. So this just shows the need and the demand for other courses of action for cancer treatment. So that's where proton therapy comes in. So proton therapy is an advanced form of therapy, and an advanced form of radiation therapy that uses ionized hydrogen proton beams instead of X-rays that target cancer or tumors more precisely without damaging the surrounding healthy organs and tissues. And while this idea of proton therapy is fairly new method of treatment, the idea dates back soon after the development of the cyclotron in 1929 by Robert R. Wilson, who was the first to develop the idea of the use of protons in applications in medicine. In 1954, the first patients received proton beam therapy to treat metastatic breast cancer at the Berkeley Radiation Laboratory. And this was remarkable because it showed that this application did have some sort of promise. So proton therapy did receive FDA approval finally in 1988, with the first hospital-based proton therapy opening at the Loma Linda University Medical Center in California in 1991. So how proton therapy works. So proton therapy works by the separation of hydrogen atoms accelerated in a particle accelerator called a synchrotron. So a gantry, which is the device that you see at the top of this image, that big device that rotates around the patient, it uses a magnet to produce protons into a small 5 millimeter beam as it is being rotated around the patient. And the energy from the protons can be adjusted based on the depth of the tumor or size of the cancer. And the radiation from the protons damage the tumor by inhibiting DNA growth. So protons are characterized by this unique phenomenon called the Bragg peak. And the Bragg peak is what plots radiation stopping power as it moves throughout the tissues. So with protons, as opposed to photons in X-rays, they deposit majority of their energy slowly at first at a single point. So the protons move, as you can see in this bottom image, they move up to a point and they remain kind of steady, distributing all their energy to the cancer or the tumor before dropping, the energy dropping. So that kind of shows the more precision aspect of protons as opposed to X-rays, where you see that high emission of radiation, and even though it does drop, it still remains throughout the body. So photons move throughout the body beyond the tumor, resulting in a high exit dose, which is the excess radiation that exists outside of the radiation area for treating the cancer or the tumor directly, and that is what can lead to the damage of the surrounding organs or tissues. So why do we not hear more about proton therapy? Well, the reason why it is not such a common method of treatment is because there are only 40 centers in the US with 200,000 patients treated worldwide. So compare that to the 1.9 million in the US alone that get diagnosed with cancer annually. That is a very small amount of people, patients. And also to add to that, the cost of the equipment is extremely high, and the team of specialists that are required to help people throughout their course of treatment are very specialized physicists and dosimetrists. And it is just a very specialized area that not many people are aware of and not many people get training for. And oftentimes this treatment is not covered by insurance. And most of all, there's a longer planning time because of preliminary imaging, as well as dose planning through algorithms and simulation. So one of the methods of simulation that is used by physicists to predict the movement of particles is the Monte Carlo method. So the Monte Carlo method is a probability simulation that estimates the possible outcomes of a certain event. And the name Monte Carlo method is derived from the casino in Monaco, since the idea of this method is all on the basis of chance. So the movement of each individual proton is tracked, and the mean free path, which is defined as the average distance particles will move between collisions, is sampled by a random number generator and probability generator. And large amount of particles are required to make this simulation function, and making it very accurate, because the core idea behind this algorithm is that the more input there is, the higher the accuracy. So that this course of treatment is very accurate. However, it is not very efficient, since it is very time consuming to track each particle individually. So it takes a few hours for dose calculation with still 2.5% certainty. So as you can see on the top, you see the different ways that particles do react. So you see the you can see the scattering, as well as the replacement of the primary protons in figure C, the scattering in figure B. And then in the second image, you see that idea of the Monte Carlo method with all these different paths of the protons, with kind of that line that kind of connects them all, where the predicted outcome of where most of them might lie. So a second algorithm that is used by physicists to administer dosages is through pencil beam scanning algorithm. So the proton beam is approximated by a set of mathematical pencil beams, which pencil beams are protons of the beam having the same direction from a single Gaussian, which is basically another word for normal distribution kernel, which is just a mathematical point placement in this plane of approximation. So pencil beams then deposit their dose along this ray. So with this algorithm, it is much easier for physicists just to plug their information into this equation. So the total energy release per unit mass times the pencil beam equals the distribution of the dosages. And since it is much quicker for physicists to just plug it into this equation, it is less accurate since the equation does not describe the dose deposit and does not really account for the unpredictable movement of the protons. The proton transport. So it also does not take into account complicated geometry or large amounts of tissue heterogeneity or the beam halo, which is the small density of protons that surround the beam core. And what this means is it does not take into account, say, something like a breast tissue. So having that shape that isn't the same as what they would do in a simulation, the accuracy may falter depending on the shape. And also the tissue heterogeneity refers to differences in any qualities of the tissue that the proton beam is moving towards, because typically what happens in this algorithm is the laser is in a medium of water. And the beam halo refers to any of the beams surrounding the outside of the beam core. So this algorithm, while it is more efficient, it's less accurate. So we have to find that balance between efficiency and accuracy to administer the best ideal dose for patients. So that's when the double Gaussian model comes in. So this is a third type of model. While there are many types of models that are being proposed by physicists to increase the accuracy and efficiency of dosages, the double Gaussian model accounts for the error in the pencil beam scattering method, and researchers have developed this Gaussian beam model. So Gaussian beams are light beams where the electric field profile in a plane perpendicular to the beam axis can be described with a Gaussian function. So that means when they are making this approximation of where this beam is going to lie on a particular field, they're going to use this function, which refers to the normal distribution. And what this function, it does take into account the beam halo, so those outside protons that may be around that core beam. And it has been found that with this particular algorithm, it is just as efficient as the pencil beam simulated one. So all physicists would do is plug in information into this equation, and that's it gives them a better idea, although it isn't completely perfect and it still needs to account for the geometry and the different shapes, also the different tissues. There are strives in improving the different algorithms to improve dosages for patients. So in conclusion, overall proton therapy has remained a pretty promising treatment to those who are in need of some sort of alternative to chemo or radiation. The University of Florida has indicated a 5-year survival rate of patients with low, intermediate, and high-risk prostate cancer to be 99%, 99%, and 76% respectively. So as you can see, this is a very promising look at the survival rate and the prognosis of patients who have been afflicted with prostate cancer. So what proton therapy does, it circumvents those unwanted side effects of chemotherapy and reduces the risk of developing that secondary cancer from radiation, and overall making these patients healthier and their immune systems higher, and they're having a better quality of life as a result. And I believe that with increased funding and research to create a more efficient and accurate dosage calculation, proton therapy has the potential to save many people's lives and improve the quality of life, especially those with late-stage cancer, since there are no risks to the treatment itself in comparison to something like chemo, where you see many of the risks taking a toll on their health. So yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you took something out of it. Here's my works cited.
Good job. It always happens every year that someone presents something about science and all the moderators are lost. So this is my moment. I have very limited knowledge on what you're talking about, but how difficult was it to like kind of conceptualize these formulas in your head and like really understand their function? Because I feel like I understood some level of it. I was like, okay, like the Gaussian mean got it, you know, like it goes, yes. But like how difficult was it for you to understand? Did it just take practice?
It was pretty difficult to kind of interpret them. I feel like it was kind of seeing the proton therapy as a whole, like seeing where the issues lie, and knowing that the primary struggle to even get this to fruition, to get it to be a functioning practice, is it all lies on the dosage administration, and how I was understanding the issues of the accuracy and efficiency is kind of the limiting factor and what makes this even a more promising treatment. So then I was kind of trying to interpret, okay, well, what are the ways that it can be improved? So I was trying to really pick apart the different aspects of the double Gaussian function to see, okay, so this kind of takes into account some parts of the ones that are the most commonly used functions, and kind of tries to work on improving it. So that's the best way that I tried to like think about it.
Yeah, that's very impressive. You know, I think I'm a STEM major, but I'm in my more entry level courses, and I feel like that's always like the hardest part. Like it's hard. They're always like, oh, if you understand it, then it's easy. But it's like the hard part is understanding it. So
Yeah.
I think you did a good job
Thank you.
picking that all apart. But the same question I kind of been asking everyone is like, why were you interested in this specific research topic?
Well, first, I was wanting to try to find something. I want to get into something medical related,
Mm.
and I was trying to find something medical physics related, because I was really unfamiliar, to be honest, with how many physics applications kind of transfer over to medicine, besides like X-rays, MRIs, and things like that, that are more of the treatment. And this was kind of something that I had never even heard of before. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I feel like it's very relatable, because so many of us have been afflicted by a family member being diagnosed with cancer. And I think
Mhm.
it's very fascinating how this treatment has the potential to really improve the quality of life, but of people who have cancer. But unfortunately, due to the lack of funding and it not being able to kind of come to light after so many years. That's why I wanted to learn a little bit more about it and see, learn how it even works in the first place, and how it can actually have the potential to help many people out in the
Mhm.
future.
And since there's not that much funding going towards it, was it difficult to kind of find research to present?
Well, surprisingly, because it's not a lot of funding currently, but it seems like from what I was reading, the kind of genesis of chemotherapy and proton therapy, the research studies kind of came along at the same time. So it was like the 40s when there was all these major studies being done, and that they kind of aligned with the same era, which I thought was surprising, despite now that proton therapy isn't really a common method of treatment, but we've had so much kind of research and like ideas thrown out there on how to apply it. That's why I think there was a lot of research that I could find. It's just interesting how we don't see it kind of in everyday practice.
Mhm. Well, perfect. And does anyone else have any other questions for Bailey? Perfect. If not, thank you so much for presenting. We'll go ahead
Thank
and move on
you.
to our next presenter, which is Sarah. I just want to double check to make sure that you are able to screen share at this time, Sarah.
I believe so. I don't usually use Zoom, so I'm still trying to figure this out.
Okay, it should be the bottom screen and it should be crashing.
I don't see anything that says to share my screen.
Um, it, let's see. It should be like just on the bottom, like taskbar where the chat is. There should be like a green button.
I completely skipped over it. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Can you see it?
Yes. There's just the security and privacy that's in the way. Perfect. And then you should be good. And again, you have 15 minutes, so I'll go ahead and keep time.
Okay. So I put together a little presentation to talk about the progression of dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's itself is a disease of the brain that destroys a person's memory and many of their important cognitive functions. It's the most common cause of dementia, and it affects majority of the brain itself. And as you can see here on the left, I included an image. Right above is an image of a healthy brain and what it should look like. And right below it is a diseased brain at the severe stage of Alzheimer's, which is the last stage. And as you can see, it has an enormous physical effect just as much as it has a chemical one. And along the edges of the brain are the sulci, which are these little grooves or spaces between these ridges. They've enlarged quite a bit, and this affects a person's thinking, planning, remembering. And closer to the bottom of the brain is the hippocampus, and this plays a major role in the formation of new memories, which is where the dementia takes place because they have a lot of trouble remembering anything they've been through recently. And whenever a patient is being diagnosed with this disease, a doctor will perform a variety of tests to evaluate their symptoms. And depending on the severity of the symptoms they're exhibiting at that moment, will interpret the stage they've progressed to. And they take a lot of consideration into any observations made by family members or close friends, just because anything they've may experienced, they may not be having at that exact moment, or they, of course, won't really remember exactly what they've experienced beforehand. And as of this year, it's estimated that over 6 million people above the age of 65 have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. About 73% of those people are above the age of 75, and about 10.7 are between the ages of 65 and 74. And I included here on the left a diagram from last year in comparison. And as you can see, the percentage of those diagnosed between those ages of 65 and 74 has dropped significantly, going from 27.6 all the way down to 10.7. However, those above the age of 75, it stayed pretty consistent, going from like 72.5 to 73. In this disease, there's about 3 stages. It goes from mild to moderate to severe. It's categorized based on the severity of the symptoms they're experiencing at that time. And on the right side, as you can see, I included another image showing the physical effects of the brain depending on each stage. Within the, oh, I went too far. Within the early onset stage, they appear to function pretty normally from an outside view, and they show symptoms of average forgetfulness that is usually very common with aging itself. However, this is when they start having some mild memory and cognitive impairment, and it could be things like they have difficulty concentrating on stuff, planning, problem solving. It can start taking effect in their place of work. This is where they have more difficulty remembering certain names of people or things or certain words in conversations. And this is where an outsider will start taking notice in slight changes in their behavior or in their personality. And on the right, I included another table with a variety of age groups. And on the right are percentages of those experiencing mild cognitive impairment. And about 10 to 15% of these people in these age groups every year will continue on to develop dementia due to Alzheimer's. And this stage itself is probably the ideal stage for anybody to put plans into place in terms of medical care or financial decisions or any end of life plans, just because once they progress to those like next stages, they won't be able to make decisions for themselves due to the dementia. The next stage is the moderate stage. This is where the symptoms of dementia are much more noticeable and their daily activities or everyday tasks become very difficult for them to complete by themselves. And so this is where they start having a lot more assistance in helping them complete even the most basic task. And this is when a lot of emotional outbursts begin to take place because they have a lot of difficulty expressing what they're thinking and what they're feeling at that time and may not even know for themselves exactly what they're thinking or how they're feeling. And this leads to a lot of confusion, which of course leads to frustration and anger and aggression. And they can react in a lot of unpredictable ways, like refusing to bathe or even refusing to eat. Within the last stage is the most severe stage. This is where the severe dementia takes place and they begin to require around the clock care because they start having difficulty even navigating the places that they go to every day, even their own home pretty much, and they become a risk to themselves just because them having that severe dementia, they tend to forget what they've been doing a few minutes prior. And this can lead them to doing things like leaving the stove on, and that can lead to a very bad situation. And it also, this is where physical impairment starts to take place. And due to that deterioration in their brain, because of the breadth of the brain cells, and that causes a major reduction in movement. And because of that, it leads them more prone to getting hurt or to infections and like for things such as pneumonia, which can be fatal for a lot if not taken care of properly. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
No worries, take your time.
I'm so sorry about that. Anyways, going on to the more biological side of it, like the cause for this disease is not completely understood yet, as many may know. There are two major components that are usually present in the progression of it. The components consist of the buildup of the proteins amyloid beta and tau, forming these tangles and plaques within and around the neurons of the brain. And as you can see here in the picture that I provided, within this cell membrane of the neuron is the APP molecule, which is the amyloid precursor protein. It's said to help grow and repair neurons after like an injury and stuff like that. And as any proteins, it can like get recycled, it gets used, and over time it gets broken down and gets recycled by these enzymes known as alpha and gamma secretase. And these enzymes, they basically cut in and they cut the protein into certain sections that can become soluble and they can be recycled. However, in this case, the alpha secretase gets replaced by beta secretase, and it comes in and it cuts the protein abnormally. And these abnormal sections are chemically sticky, so they tend to start clumping together and they form these plaques, as you can see in the right photo. And they form together and they block off the connection sites between the cells of like the neurons. And this affects, of course, the relay of signals or information, resulting in leading to an immune response that results in inflammation, and it damages any of the surrounding neurons. And the formation of those plaques causes pathways within the neuron to begin to open up. And within the neuron is where these tau proteins are, and they're embedded within the microtubules inside of them. And a microtubule is basically similar to that of like a railway because it transmits that nutrients and molecules down the cell. And these pathways opening from the formation of those plaques causes the activation of kinase. And kinase brings phosphate groups to that tau protein that's embedded within those microtubules, and it causes them to disband from the microtubule, causing these tangles. And because of these tangles, they're not able to transmit those nutrients or those molecules down the cell, and it leads to the death of the cell. There's no known cure for this disease, of course. And however, knowing the severity in a patient's diagnosis is crucial to providing the best care based on their own needs. Of course, because every person is different, because of how they are personality wise, they react differently in terms of the symptoms that they're experiencing. And of course, long-term care is inevitable once you receive a diagnosis like this, and eventually due to those deterioration of those brain cells, they'll require that around-the-clock care, and because of the dangerous environment that they can put themselves in. And of course, this is where a lot of families, they begin to consider any assisted living facilities or nursing facilities, and majority of people actually go into choosing in a caregiver because you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of where they can take care of your loved one that's being diagnosed. And it brings a lot of comfort being able to have them taken care of by a caregiver, let's say in their own home. It brings a lot of comfort to the families, and it also could provide that patient that's been diagnosed a little bit of comfort in terms of being in a vaguely familiar setting wherever it is they are at in the severity of their diagnosis. A recent study has shown new treatment methods being tested. It's through the use of certain drugs, and they're using these drugs in hopes of slowing down the progression if diagnosed at a later time, or even hopefully preventing it entirely if they catch it early enough. The main focus of this research for the medications are preventions against the abundance of the proteins that are forming these plaques and these tangles in and around the neurons, as well as that inflammatory response that always follows them. And they've been using a drug, or they tested a drug. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. The aducanumab. I'm not sure, but it's that one. They've tested it over a few drug trials, and it was in hopes of targeting that amyloid protein specifically first, and hopefully reducing the formation of plaques that is going on around the neurons itself. And over a few drug trials, they were actually successful in reducing those plaques being formed. However, it did result in an abnormality of the amyloid protein and led to a numerous amount of detrimental side effects that were way more harmful than they were beneficial. And to finish up, although there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease, researchers are actively studying it every day just to hopefully fully understand it one day. And this disease does come with a lot of difficulties for many people, not only for the ones being diagnosed, but also for those loved ones. And knowing the signs and symptoms of the early onset dementia will better help prepare those families for what they will end up facing. And that's about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. How was that for you? I know it was your first time kind of doing that Zoom
I'm a
presentation.
little nervous. I don't know the last time I presented in general. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know, like, good job. I think you did such a good job. There's a little hiccups, but don't stress, it's part of the process of learning. So you did so well. Just giving you the question that, I've been asking everyone so far. Is, what made you choose this topic in specific?
So I've always been interested in it overall, just because it's not fully understood yet and how much research they've been going on with it for a very long time. And then recently, earlier this year, my grandma on my mom's side was just diagnosed with it, and she actually progressed very fast. She's in the severe stage right now, and you can see all the effects that it's starting to take on her mind and her body. And she's not really the same person she was. So in itself, I wanted to get a deeper dive on it, I guess, just to really understand what's happening and what I can do to help her, I guess.
And because this is such like a topic of interest, both like in the field and personally, do you see yourself taking this research anywhere else further down the line?
I'm sorry, can you say the end part again? You cut out after taking this research.
Oh, further down the line, like as you continue your studies or if you ever go on to do more research?
If I did, it would be more on my own time just because what I'm going into school to be a midwife, so it's not really around the area of what I'm studying for personally. But me myself, I would definitely keep up with the research in terms of like anytime they have a new discovery or if they eventually have a breakthrough or something, I would love to keep up with it over time.
That's perfect. And what kind of struck you when you were doing research? Like what stood out to you the most when you're doing all this research?
Noticing, I guess, the severity of the last stage. Of course, it's kind of self-explanatory, I guess, that it would be really bad. But just reading more into it and seeing it for myself, it really like stood out to me in terms of like, especially the physical effects that it starts having on the person. And especially, I didn't realize how big of a physical effect it had on the brain itself in terms of it shrinking and affecting all the cell death, making it look a little more shriveled and smaller than an actual brain.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions for me. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you again. You did such a wonderful job. We'll continue now on to Joshua, who has a pre-recorded presentation, which I will share right now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Lazo, and today I'm going to be going over autism. So, what is autism? Well, autism is classified as a neurobehavioral spectrum disorder. Well, what does this mean? This means that autism is going to affect your brain, and by affecting your brain, it's going to affect your behavior because your brain kind of determines your behavior. What does it mean when it's a spectrum disorder? Well, a spectrum disorder is something where there is no single cause for the problem. There's no single cause for the disorder. Instead, it is affected by many different things. It could be the way the person grows up. It could be physical conditions like, oh, I got hit hard. Or it could be something like your genetics. And so when you see a person with autism, you can see a change in their personality in three different categories, that being their social interaction, the way they communicate, and their behavior. And so a person who acts with autism may show that they are avoiding eye contact. They might have difficulty reading your emotions or displaying their own facial emotions. They could have inappropriate body posture in different contexts. They might be in an interview, and while they're supposed to have a very serious and like formal body posture, body language, they might be displaying, subconsciously displaying that they are relaxed and they don't care. They can have a lack of reciprocity. Reciprocity is a idea of give and take. And so if I give someone my book and I expect to have it back, they might not understand that mentality. And so they just keep the book. Normally people with autism will have a higher priority in self-interests. And so they will have a lower interest in group activities. They might prioritize themselves over the group. And two different things that people with autism have when they're babies is they may not react to peekaboo at all. And they might not be comforted by touch. And so if I'm a father and play peekaboo with my baby, and they're not reacting to peekaboo, they're not reacting to peekaboo at all, then that could be, oh, this person, my son might have autism. Or a mom goes to the baby to hug him because the baby looks uncomfortable. Well, consistently, if that baby is not being comforted by our touch, by anyone's touch at all, that could be a sign that, hey, this kid might have autism. In other areas, communication. So in communication, um, the signs of autism could be shown right off the bat or in developmental stages of communication. So if the person with autism is mute, as in they never talk at all, that could be a sign. Another thing is when they turn like 10 years old or later on in life, they just abruptly stop talking and they don't talk again. That's another sign. Or, okay, let's say that they talk. Let's say that they are able to talk to you. Things that you could see is that they might have difficulty taking turns in conversation. And so you're telling them a story, and they keep on cutting you off. That could be a sign that they may have autism. Another thing is echolalia. And so I'll give you an example of what echolalia is. Echolalia is saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" And the person responds with doing. Now, that doesn't make any sense, but they're echoing what I'm saying. That's what echolalia is. They're echoing what you're saying, even though it doesn't really make sense most of the time. Difficulty taking perspective of the listener. And so that's an issue with empathy. And so you are telling a person, well, here's how my day was. I had a rough day. Well, the person with autism may not understand how you feel, and so they may not they might not match your tone and match the way you feel. Other areas of communication that are affected in people with autism are responding to humor and understanding innuendo. So innuendo is hints and subtle phrases in order to help you like understand what they mean. Like, and then there's also humor. And so in those areas, normally people with autism are going to take you seriously. They're going to take you literally when you're talking to them. And so if I were to give them a joke, I said, my dog is a mop. My dog literally isn't a mop, but my dog looks like a mop. That might be like, your dog is a mop. They might take you seriously by that. Or if you're getting innuendo, you're giving subtle phrases that indicate something. They may not understand what you're saying. They might go over their head. And then behavior. So if you're looking at a person with autism from afar, you can see a couple different things. They might be fidgeting with toys. They might be rocking back and forth or flapping their arms and legs. Now, rocking back and forth or fidgeting with toys, that doesn't mean that, hey, you have autism, but it could be a sign if they're doing that more than normal. If they're doing that in a way that's like, oh, this person's doing it a lot more than normal, that could be a sign that this person might have autism. Another area is a necessity to feel for a similar environment. So if you take a person with autism outside of their home into a place they've never seen before, they might feel really uncomfortable. They have a necessity to be in an environment that they feel familiar in. And then there are their senses. So hypersensitivity and lack of awareness. Let's talk about your sensory senses, like your gustation, your taste, your hearing, your smelling. Person with autism, they say you smell something really bad, something really foul. If they're hypersensitive in their smelling senses, they can smell that what you're smelling, but 10 times worse. Or they may not have awareness to it at all, a lack of awareness to the smell. Another area of lack of awareness is they are doing something right now. They're fidgeting with a toy and you're calling for them. They hear you. Hey, I need you to come over here. Well, they hear you, but they're busy with their toy and they just don't really respond. They may understand you and may hear you, but they just lack the awareness to get up and be like, "Oh, I'm coming over to help you out." Now we talked a lot about the signs of autism, the symptoms of autism that could be pretty bad. But there's one thing that's good about autism that some people with autism have. It's savant syndrome. Savant syndrome is this condition where a person is going to be really, really good at one thing. They may have a lot easier time at learning music, math. They may have a lot easier time at learning science. But usually people with savant syndrome tend to will be really good at one thing, but they tend to lack in other areas. Like, I may be really good at playing the piano, but I'm not that good at listening to people, at talking to people. I might not be that good at doing my finances. Other causes of causes of autism are either genetics or environment. So now when I say causes of autism, there's no singular root cause of autism. Genetics and environment play into it, but they don't like cause it. There's no one single gene that says you're gonna have autism, or the environment is gonna make you have 100% chance of having autism. Instead, these areas play into it. And so in genetics is mainly seen as like a huge factor of why autism happens. Because if you look at the statistics, boys are 4 to 5 times more likely than females to get autism, and boys will have a different genetic structure. They have different sex chromosomes. While boys have XY chromosomes, females have XX chromosomes, and so they are built differently genetically. So seeing this statistically significant factor of 4 to 5 times more likely, then it kind of shows that hey, genetics are a big impact on autism. But not only that, if you look at twin studies, twins, like say, here's one twin over here, twin one twin, his name is John, and his twin brother is Jacob. Well, John has autism, and because John has autism, as seen from statistics, Jacob has an 80% chance to have autism as well. And this is pretty significant, saying that, okay, well, they have a similar genetic structure, um, but because they have a similar genetic structure, his twin brother is going to have an 80% chance of having autism. Now, the environment also plays a big role in autism. If you look at cities with a lot of jobs in information technology sectors, where they're working with computers a lot, they have 2 times higher rate of autism, and this makes sense because if you look at the signs of autism, how people with autism present, you can see that they have a lot of social and communication issues, and so this makes sense in the information technology sectors because if if people are working on the computers a lot and not working with people that much, then it makes sense that they're more likely to have autism. And then there's pregnancy period. So the way that children are treated or that babies are treated during pregnancy indirectly affects whether or not they will have autism. And so as known widely is that moms who smoke and moms who are exposed to dangerous chemicals like pollution are they give their babies a susceptible chance to have neurodevelopmental issues. Their babies will have a higher likelihood of having issues with the brain. And so um, this plays in context into like conditions like depression, epilepsy, and ADHD because if the moms who smoke and are exposed to different dangerous chemicals give their babies a higher chance of having these kind of conditions, well, looking at it, 70% of autistics have these kind of conditions. They have conditions like depression, epilepsy, and ADHD, these core current conditions. And so when medical providers look at this, they're going to use a clinical investigation, aka a series of tests over time to identify whether or not someone has autism. They're going to use these tests to identify risk factors, like if the kids will have autism, like if the kids will have co-occurring conditions in order to play into statistics to see if, okay, I'm going to use all these different things to say, okay, you have this co-occurring condition, or you live in a city with a lot of information technology, or you're a boy. I'm going to use these different factors to say, okay, this person might have a high likelihood of autism. Okay, so because this person has a high likelihood of autism, I'm going to use more tests on them. I'm going to use an MRI. I'm going to use a magnetoencephalography. What an MRI is this test that this machine that looks at your brain to see what it looks like. And I've seen in studies, people with autism at 6 to 24 months old will have an enlarged amygdala. It's a part of your brain that's responsible for memory and emotion. And they'll also have neuroinflammation, aka inflammation in their brain. Not only that, but later on in the life, they could have an enlarged prefrontal cortex as part of their brain. And that part of the brain is responsible for logic. And so these are big signs that, hey, this person really might have autism. And then there's magnetoencephalography. What this is it tests the electrical impulses in your brain, aka what parts of your brain are being used at a given time. And so not only people with autism are going to have like more local impulses. And so while you would probably be using this part of your brain, this part of your brain, this part of your brain, and this part of your brain to solve a problem, the person with autism will tend to just use this part of the brain a lot more often. And this could explain why a person might have savant syndrome because they tend to be using this part of the brain a lot more rather than the rest of the brain. Now, after the medical providers diagnose a person with autism, they will usually group it into 2 different categories: Asperger's syndrome or Kanner syndrome, and these are based on severity. And so a person with Asperger's syndrome is called a high functioning autistic, while a Kanner syndrome will be a low functioning autistic. And so a high functioning autistic is a person who could live independently. They can live on themselves and not have to worry a whole lot about treatments because the symptoms that they have with autism aren't affecting them so bad that they can't really live a more normal life. But with a person with Kanner syndrome, they need to have a lot more resources such as a caregiver or medications that might tailor to their co-occurring conditions, or they might have coaching. And so if a person with autism might not understand empathy, then they have coaching sessions to help them improve upon their empathetic skills. And then they'll also, having autism, like having savant syndrome in autism is, a big opportunity. And so what coaches will do is they'll build upon their strengths. If you're really good at math, we'll give you a math tutor. We're going to give you a lot of resources to help you build upon your strength, but we're also going to give you resources to make sure that you're not really bad at everything else. But that is my presentation. I hope you like it. Thank you for letting me do this on the presentation.
Perfect. And hold on. Oh, everybody continue. I think Joshua's not present at the moment, so we can't really ask him questions. That comes all to an end. I guess that's the ending. We can't really ask him questions since he's not present. But thank you all so much for coming. You're welcome to go into other breakout rooms. I believe we're the first to finish. So everyone else is breakout rooms. If you look at the program, is all there. Let me share the commentary form with you guys. So if you can please fill this out. For the honors program, just commentary on how the Omni went, what we could do better, how you felt about people presenting and things like that. Just take a quick couple minutes to fill that out. Hopefully we all see you again back next semester. Good luck on all of your finals. Thank you for your time to do all this. And this will be uploaded to the YouTube soon so that you can show your professors and all that. Once again, thank you so much. You're all free to leave at this moment or enter other breakout rooms as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.